Accordingly, returning to McLean Ferry on the Stanislaus, at the point where Coyote Creek joins the river, I traveled up the creek some miles, clambering over rocks and winding round steep overhanging banks, by a trail so little used that it was hardly discernible. I was amply repaid for my trouble, however, when, after an hour or two of hard climbing in the roasting hot sun, I at last reached the bridges, and found them much more beautiful natural curiosities than I had imagined. Having never been able to get very intelligible account of what they really were, I had supposed that some large rocks rolling down the mountain had got jammed over the creek, by the steepness of the rocky banks on each side, which I fancied would be a very easy mode of building a natural bridge. My idea, however, was very far from the reality. In fact, bridges was an inappropriate name. They should rather have been called caves or tunnels. How they were formed is a question for geologists, but their appearance gave the idea that there had been a sort of landslip, which blocked up the bed of the creek for a distance of 200 or 300 feet, and to the height of 50 or 60 above the bed of the stream. They were about a quarter of a mile apart, and their surface was like that of the hills, perfectly smooth and covered with grass and flowers. The interiors were somewhat the style of the place, but the upper one was the larger and more curious of the two. The faces of the tunnel were perpendicular, presenting an entrance like a church door, about 12 feet high, surrounded by huge, stony, fungus-like excrescences of a dark purple and green color. The waters of the creek flowed in here and occupied all the width of the entrance. There were only a few inches of depth and gave a perfect reflection of the whole of the interior, which was a lofty chamber some 100 feet in length, the straight sides of which met at the top in the form of a Gothic arch. At the further end was a vista of similarly arched small passages, branching off into darkness. The walls were deeply carved into pillars in grotesque forms, in which one could trace all manner of fanciful resemblances, while at the base of some of the columns were most symmetrically formed projections, many of might which be taken for fonts, the top of them being a circular basin containing water. These projections were of stone, and had the appearance of being congealed suddenly while in a boiling state. There was a beautiful regularity in the roughness of their surface. Some of the rounded forms being deeply carved were circular lines, similar to the engine turning on the back of a watch, and others being rippled like a shirt of mail, the rippling getting gradually and regularly finer, till at the top of the surface was hardly more rough than that of a file. The walls and roof seemed to have been smothered over with some stuff which had hardened into a sort of cement, presenting a polished surface of bright cream color, tinged here and there with pink and pale green. The entrance was sufficiently large to light up the whole place, which, from its general outline, gave somewhat the idea of a church, for, besides the pillars, with their flowery ornaments, the Gothic arches, and the fonts, there was at one side and near the entrance one of those stone excrescences, much larger than the others, and which would have been passed for a pulpit, overhung as it was by a projection of a similar nature, spreading out from the wall several feet above it. The sides of the arches forming the roof did not quite meet at the top, but looked like crests of two immense foaming waves, between which were seen the extremities of numbers of pendants of a like flower form. There was nothing rough or uncertain about the place. Every part seemed as if it were elaborately finished, and in strict harmony with the whole, and the rays of the setting sun fell on the water with the entrance, and reflected a subdued light over the brilliant hues of the interior. It looked like a gorgeous temple, which no art could improve, and such as no human imagination could have designed. As the other end of the tunnel, the water emerged from a much smaller cave, and which was so low as to not permit a man from crawling in. The caves at each end of the other tunnel were also very small, though the architecture was of the same flowery style. The face of it, however, were extremely beautiful. To the height of 50 or 60 feet, they presented a succession of irregular, overhanging projections, bulging out like immense mushrooms, of which the prevailing hue was a delicate pink, with occasional patch of bright green. In any part of the Old World, such a place would be the object of a pilgrimage, and even where it was, it attracted many visitors, numbers of whom had, according to the established custom of snobhood, acknowledged their own insignificance, and had sought out a little immortality for their wretched names by scratching them in a large smooth surface by the side of the entrance to the cave. While I was there, a Yankee miner came to see the place. He paid a very hurried visit. He had not even time to scratch his initials, but he was enthusiastic in his admiration of the beautiful object of nature which, however, he thought was quite thrown away in such an out-of-the-way part of creation. It distressed him to think that such a valuable piece of property could not be turned into any profitable account. Now, he said, if I had this thing just about 10 miles from New York City, I'd show it to folks at 25 cents a head and make an everlasting pile of money out of it.